This week on the Shameless Podcast.
Long before that was a reality, I went through some really challenging mental health stuff, debated suicide. I had somebody very close to me that I felt safe reaching out to. And I reached out to him, and he's actually my business partner now, so it worked out really nicely. And I explained to him what I was dealing with, and he gave me feedback.
At times we reject the notion of feedback from somebody who we don't respect. Somebody who's not the perfect whatever it is.
I think feedback is layer one. Feedback is unconscious. You're just doing it. I think constructive feedback is conscious. One of the reasons pain is such an important pivot point for most of us is it gets rid of the ego. You have an ego death. You had an ego.
You can instill fear. You can drive a certain level of performance through fear. And I was actually having a discussion with somebody earlier today, is like, you can use the fear of somebody else. Quiet the ego, soften the heart, open the mind, and be kind.
Feedback it's not recommended, it's necessary. Yeah, at the end of the day, you either get the feedback a little bit each day, little by little by little by little, or you get it all at once at the end.
Shameless family, welcome today. My name is Dzikamai Gangaidzo. I don't know why I had to think about my own damn name. I'm Dzikamai Gangaidzo. I'm the host of the Shameless Podcast. We do this every single Friday, where we look to have real, authentic conversations with no shame. And today we are joined by Kevin Palmieri. It's a pleasure having you today.
DK, thank you for having me. I'm excited. I forget my name often, so no judgment towards you from me.
You know what? And that touches really on the topic of today, because I think that we should be judged I should be judged for forgetting my name, and I should be getting that feedback a lot more. Like, hey, dude, that is not acceptable. You need to do better. And so today's actual point of conversation is no more bad feedback, shift culture, and unlock results. Today, I am excited because not only are we going to have that, how can I say it, that discussion around feedback, which is something that's sometimes a personal problem or something that's very easy to turn into an emotional scar. It can trigger people. It can be, if done wrong or if received wrong, I mean, it opens a can of worms quite quickly. And so I'm really looking forward to unpacking that. But before we unpack that, I am so curious for you to first introduce yourself to the audience, maybe a little bit of a sneak peek into what Kevin Palmieri is about.
Yeah, I am about growth and about self-awareness and about knowing myself at the deepest level. So I host a podcast called Next Level University. We're a global top 100 podcast with listeners in 180 countries. We have 2,180 episodes, something like that as of today. And that is my full-time job. I'm a full-time podcaster. And long before that was a reality, I went through some really challenging mental health stuff, debated suicide, and thought to myself, if I could be a full-time podcaster who poured into the lives of others, that would be the dream. And now essentially I get to live my dream, which I'm super grateful for.
That's absolutely amazing. And I mean, massive accomplishment, 180 countries, 1,187. It's not that we're counting, but that's a lot of episodes. And so I guess for me, I'd like to maybe start with that portion where you said you were battling with suicide. What led you into a space like that? And how then did you sort of bring yourself from that space forward?
I think what led me to it was running from trauma and running from truth. We talked about this a little bit in the preamble. I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. And I don't think I really dealt with that until I was 27. So I was somebody who didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I decided pretty early in life I wasn't going to go to college. So my job options were limited. And I did a lot of dead-end jobs. And I convinced myself I would never be successful. Eventually, DK, I got lucky. And I fell into this industry called weatherization.
What?
Weatherization. Have you ever heard of weatherization? No?
That doesn't even sound real. Firstly,
it's real. I promise. I promise. It's all it is, and especially where I live on the East Coast, there was a really big push to make homes and buildings more energy efficient.
Okay.
So our company would go into predominantly schools, and it was our job to work in the boiler rooms, to work above the drop ceiling, windows, doors. We're trying to make the buildings energy efficient. So I went from making $15 an hour as a construction laborer to anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour doing this new job. And this is where it started. I convinced myself that I was going to be successful, and this job was going to fix all of that internal stuff that I had been running from for my entire life. So essentially, long story short, I made the most money I'd ever made. My girlfriend left me. I had an eating disorder after a bodybuilding show, and I started a podcast because I wanted to become self-aware. Fell in love with podcasting, as you very clearly have as well.
Yeah.
Right? I fell in love with it, but I had to keep doing this job that I hated, and my mental health was getting worse, and I was traveling all over the place, and I wasn't eating, and I wasn't sleeping, and it was just not good. And eventually I woke up one day and I thought to myself, well, if I was just to take my life, I would take all of my problems with me.
Yeah.
And that is how we got there.
And so in a moment like that, like said simply, it was the crossroad where you then said, I have to either face reality and address certain things, or I'm going down a very scary path. What brought you the strength, the courage to make the decision that you ended up making?
I had somebody very close to me that I felt safe reaching out to. And I reached out to him, and he's actually my business partner now, so it worked out really nicely. And I explained to him what I was dealing with, and he gave me feedback. He said, Kev, over the last couple of years, your awareness has changed a ton, but your environments have remained the same. I think it's time for you to change your environment. And that was it for me, DK. I heard those words. It created an opportunity for a brighter future that I didn't know existed. I left my job 2 or 3 months later, and then him and I partnered up and tried to figure out how to turn this thing into a business, which was brutal. And it took longer than I thought, and we were broke, and it was a challenge for sure. But yeah, I reached out to someone who I felt safe talking to. And I think at a deeper level, I reached out to somebody who actually understood me so they could give me the truth without hurting me more. He gave me the right amount of truth at the right time.
So what would you then, in that moment, would you were actually looking to listen and looking to hear, would you, and you said right moment, right time, do you think that you would have been as receptive if it was 6 months before or a year before? How do you think that would have? Yep.
Because I wasn't in enough pain to have that level of humility. I was a sponge at that point. Like, just help me. Just somebody tell me what to do. I want to do it. I want to grow. I want to evolve. I just don't know how. So I don't think so. No, I think I would have convinced myself that, who are you to tell me how to live? Look at how successful I am. It would have been really hard to hear.
So then with that, then how would you then make that journey of that humility, of having that humility sooner? Now in hindsight, right? I mean, because it's always easier looking back at it, right? Like I'm sure you're kicking yourself going, well, I wasn't in enough pain. I wasn't humble. I didn't have enough humility. But surely there are things that someone can do now before they get to that point of inflection to actually get themselves to have a more healthier mindset and be able to get and seek help and be able to receive it sooner.
Yeah, I think it's a duality, as most things are. If right now you're struggling, you matter way more than you probably realize. And if you're somebody who thinks you're the best and you're untouchable and you're God's gift to earth, in the grand scheme of things, you don't matter that much in the way this all plays out. That day, Alan is my business partner. He did a really good job of letting me know how much I mattered.
Wow.
But I didn't get enough feedback before that. I didn't have somebody say, like, Kev, I know you make a lot of money, but that doesn't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. That's not it. There's more to life than making money. Go do something hard, give back, donate, be charitable. I didn't have the feedback that brought me to 5. So this is what we have something we call the drive to 5.
Okay.
0 is somebody who doesn't believe in themselves, doesn't think anything is possible for them, doesn't think they can get a mentor because who wants to work with them? They don't believe in themselves. So that's the 0 end. The 10 end is somebody who thinks they can do anything regardless of effort. They don't need a mentor because they already have the answers to everything. And they're arrogant. They don't take action because they don't think they need to. I think the goal, DK, is always to find our way to 5. What is the middle? That's humble. That's confident. Right? So the simplest answer is I was over and I had to find things that would have gotten me to 5. And that was feedback. And I was not willing to listen to a lot of the feedback I'm sure I was probably getting.
Okay. Wow. So I guess the My question then is, do people sometimes find feedback to be a personal critique and or criticism? And then now, how do you ensure that when giving feedback, someone is able to actually receive it? Because I guess, yeah, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I definitely think it comes across as a personal attack if the person giving feedback to you, one, does not understand you. They don't know what it's like to be you. So it's really hard for them to give you feedback because you feel unseen. That's one. And then I think part two is it's clear that they're giving you feedback because it benefits them, not you.
Wow.
I think those are two really, really, really big things. So anytime I'm giving feedback, I always I will say this 1,000,000 times. I can only imagine what it's like. I'm not a father. I don't know. I can only imagine what it's like to have a child and run a business. Don't know. So I always try to say, look, I don't know what your human experience has been. And I just want to call that out right now because I don't want you to feel unseen. Yeah. That's part one. Part two, the feedback that I'm going to deliver to you is directly connected to your goals based on what you told me you want, trying to take myself out of it as much as possible. Now, obviously, if this is somebody on the team, this is somebody I'm working with, yes, our goals are aligned. But I want to give you feedback based on what you told me you want. Yeah. Because you essentially have given permission to me to help you get to your goals, and feedback is the way to do it. So I think those are two really simple / complicated things that can go right and or wrong.
And so you talked about trust. With Alan, you had a large amount of trust. Is it possible to receive feedback from somebody who you don't trust?
Yes.
What?
Of course.
If I don't trust you, then how on earth am I going to listen to you? How I am going to disagree on this point here?
Because if somebody has something that you value, I think they can convince you to do something, even if you don't like them, because you think the reward will be worth it. Okay. So maybe not in the traditional, sense.
Okay.
But I think it's possible. I think it's possible.
Okay. All right. Fine. All right. So just to make sure I've understood you, as long as there's a greater inner reason to be receptive towards an individual, even though there might be elements where you might not like or you might not vibe or whatever it is, you can look past those because you go, you know what, there's value in this process that I will go through. But then that takes somebody who's very self-aware in order to be able to go, I'm not going to be petty today because it's a lot easier to be petty.
It's fair. Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah. But then go first.
I was going to say, I think everybody at the end of the day is both an example and a warning.
Explain
so
that.
There are people, my business partner is reading a book by Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is one of the best NFL coaches of all time. He's an example, a shining example of how to be really good at football and coaching. But outside of that, the way he's lived his life and his relationships, that might be a warning of what not to do. So let's focus on the silo of success. And I'm not going to take relationship advice from him, but he's one of the best coaches of all time for a reason. And to the point, even some of those reasons are not reasons I would want to adopt. But
yeah, fair enough.
The understanding that there are some people that are world-class in one thing and just terrible in others, I think it allows you to find positives in negatives, potentially.
It's very interesting. And the reason why I say that's interesting is because it's easy to look at an individual and go based on a component of their life, based on, I don't know, their political views, right? And then you just completely disregard the whole human being as though there's no value in different elements of their life. And then again, I listen to that and I go, that's fantastic, but it's going to need a lot of something deep within me to be able to separate those two worlds. What is that? What would you call that thing? Because it's just like, I'm like thinking about it and I'm like, more times, 9 times out of 10, I am going to default to probably what's easier, what's less like controversial or conflicting within me, and I'll just go, you know what, it's easy just to paint a single stroke and just run with that. What would you say is that thing inside you that then goes, I can separate the two worlds? Or would you go, how do you then separate it? How would you go in your brain? I'm gonna
the art is different than the artist. Look, if I had to judge everybody's artistry based on their character, I essentially would listen to nobody. Unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is something I'm always, the morality of this, I'm thinking of this all the time. So that's one thought, is I'm always trying to separate the art from the artist. That's one. And the second thing is, I think a really good test for this is when you work with someone, they teach you lessons, and eventually the closer you get to them, the closer you get to the truth. You eventually cross a chasm where you realize this character is not aligned.
Yeah, okay.
But the knowledge, the awareness, and the lessons they have taught me, I've been using this whole time. Now do I just throw them in the trash because now I know I don't like this person? Yeah. We've had that happen in real time where I've seen the benefits of the lessons and then I've seen the detriments of the character. I don't talk to that person anymore, but I still think the lessons are valuable. And what if they can help someone else? I'm doing a disservice to you if I don't share them with you. And that's the duality of morality. It's a whole freaking thing. I don't know if there's a simple answer. I think you have to, as a human being, there has to be a deep belief that it will be worth it. That's the best example the best answer I can give. If you think it'll be worth it, you'll do it.
And I absolutely love that, because, and why this is important in relation to the topic is because I think at times we reject the notion of feedback from somebody who we don't respect, somebody who's not the perfect, whatever it is. And I can remember, it's like one of those things where you are looking at somebody who's either in a senior position or who is in a successful space. And because there's a large gap between you and them, you can idolize them to a larger degree. The second that you get to know them a lot closer, then you start to realize, they ain't as, as perfect as it might seem. Then there's a duality conflict, that character versus lessons. I mean, and then you could potentially lose out a lot more than what you possibly could gain if you carried an approach where artist versus the art, lessons despite the character, and that depth of desire to learn, or you can learn from anybody regardless of anything.
It's a challenge. I know a lot of really nice people that have amazing characters that I would never take banking advice from.
It's not that's a fair point, right? That's a very fair point, because you can find people with great characters, but then you just like, he's a great person, and so it works both ways.
It does. Everything. I said this recently to someone and they were like, what do you mean? I said, almost no content is for you.
What do you mean?
Every piece of content is on a spectrum, and the spectrum of truth is based on where you are. So I could say, if I'm on this podcast, I could say, there is a percentage of you out there right now who need to give more feedback to the people in your life. That is categorically incorrect for some percentage of you, where you need to give less feedback and more constructive feedback. That's what makes it so hard, is there's always duality in everything, which makes it impossible to have one answer.
Yeah. So you just mentioned something. You just said feedback or constructive feedback. What's the difference between the two? Because surely potatoes and potatoes.
I think feedback is layer one. Feedback is unconscious. You're just doing it. I think constructive feedback is conscious. You understand that at the end of the day, you're giving feedback to a human being who is going to take this, and they're not just going to absorb what you say. They're going to absorb what they think you meant, how you said it, what this means for their future. It's not just a Post-it note on a wall. This gets absorbed into the human. So I think conscious, constructive feedback is understanding that this is going to change the human at the human level. Feedback is just, you got to be on time. It's like, okay, well, did you know I got a flat tire on the way here and I couldn't find someone to babysit my son? Conscious is, hey, I know there's been a little bit of a pattern lately of you punching the clock a little bit late. Is everything going on okay? Is everything all right? Is there anything I can do to help? Two different conversations, two different organizations, two different cultures.
And, so I'm going to maybe share an example within my own space. And it's triggered by this point. I think early on in my career, I had a very strong sort of leadership and supervisors. So by that, I meant they would be really blunt. The type and the way they give feedback is in a very sort of almost combative manner. You are always on the edge, and it was a sort of a tense space. But you kind of get used to that, and you sort of learn to live with that. So it's not necessarily constructive, but you have to find the constructive nature regardless of the fact that it's on layer one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I was the sort of exposure that I had very early on. Then fast forward years later, and I'm now leading people. And it's so easy for me to default to the way that I experienced sort of getting feedback. And it came to a moment where somebody goes, it's not what you say, but it's how you're saying it to me that really I struggle to find it within me to either hear the message or for me to appreciate that this is for my benefit.
Mm.
And so then it is, and I have to admit, it's still one of those things where I have to consciously go, you know what? I'm going to dial it back, and I'm going to start by seeking to understand before I then go crazy, or I then go, come to a conclusion, right? And that for me it's a combination of, I'll call it the way that my past experiences, then leading into the way that I am, and then having to change what I am. Would you say that constructive feedback is more people just do it naturally, or they're constantly grappling with elements of themselves to be able to do that effectively?
I think the ability for it to be constructive, no, I think it's a skill.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a skill that's developed because you have to know how to communicate. You have to know to what level to communicate. And then you have to be persuasive or influential enough to actually get the person to do the thing, which I think just takes practice. I mean, that's a thing that takes forever, right? You're always trying to get better at that.
And so would you then say, well, you've just said it, like constructive feedback is something that you have to learn, you have to practice, and then you have to grow. Do you have like a secret handbook, like your Drive to 5? Like, is there something catchy like that on developing constructive feedback? Or if you don't have, a Drive to 10, would you recommend, like, how does somebody then stop themselves and then look to have and be effective in that constructive feedback, a framework of anything?
Man, not like the Drive to 5. I would say the best example I can give is you have to have an awareness of the person you're giving feedback to. So you seem like you have a pretty high level of confidence.
Okay. Me?
So I imagine, yes.
Who, me?
You. Yeah.
Fair enough.
So I imagine you and I get off here. Imagine this. And you say, hey, Kev, you have a lot of podcast episodes. Any feedback for me? Right? Yeah. Happens often when I'm on podcasts.
Yeah. I was going to ask you later, but I mean, since we're here now.
Well, I'll give it to you behind the scenes. I'm going to give you feedback based on the level that I think you can handle, not the level that I want to give.
Gotcha.
So I give feedback to someone based on their level of self-belief, their level of self-worth, and their level of self-efficacy. For me, that's the framework. It's not about what I want to give you. It's about what I think you can absorb from a place of construction. Beautiful. I could give you a lot of feedback. Now, imagine the feedback that I give you, DK, versus I get off an episode with somebody. This is their first time doing this. They're 17 years old, and they've never conducted an interview before. They're not high. No. They don't have a level 8 self-belief. I'm going to give them construction. Yeah. Here are the 5 things you did really well. And here's the one thing that I think is the biggest opportunity for improvement. Yeah. Yours, I might give you, here's the one thing you did really well. And honestly, these are the 5 things that you need to do to get to the next level. But that is an awareness of the person you're talking to. So I would say that's probably the best framework, for lack of better phrasing I have.
But I love that, because that is talking to not only yourself, but if you're going to help somebody, if you're going to be constructive and help somebody, it becomes less about you and it becomes more about the other person. That's the whole thing. Awareness of other person. There you go. I think that is absolutely beautiful. So, and then I'd like to also then understand about culture in teams, and how do you break a culture where feedback is something that's difficult to give? It's not always in a space where person A wants to give feedback, person B wants to receive, but it's sometimes just a complete stalemate, and it's just horrible. They all just sugarcoat the whole story. And And then nobody gains anything. So how would you reckon we could break that up?
Or the best example or best piece I can add to that is everybody on the team is allowed to give us as much feedback as they want. But just like we say to them, I will take the feedback that I think is most constructive. Okay. So you can tell me the podcast sucks, and you can tell me this is what I would do, this is what I would do, this is what I would do. I have to take your feedback with a grain of salt, just like you have to take my feedback with a grain of salt. I think it's leading by example. Yeah, if I'm going to give you feedback, DK, I better be willing to take it. And I think that way we know that it's not just a top-down, Kevin's right about everything and what Kevin says goes. There are certain things, if I created the SOP, we got to run the SOP. We got to run the SOP. And if you think you have an idea to add to that, let's do it. I'm always open. It's that. You can't, I won't say you can't. It's dangerous if everybody can give you feedback that you must take, because that throws wrenches into things. But I want people to know that our culture is we're going to give people feedback, and we're always going to try to live in the truth, even when and if the truth is uncomfortable. And that starts at the very top. That starts with me. That starts with Alan. That starts with the founders. We are going to take more feedback than almost anybody on the team. So we'll lead by example. So I think that's the best way to do it. Sometimes that's a personnel shift. Sometimes that's a whatever your mantra is. You said this in the preamble, whatever the North Star is. Yeah. You have to change it that way. But yeah, I think it starts with leading by example.
And I guess if the leaders aren't able to lead by taking feedback, then there's a risk of not living in the reality of it all. Do you want to maybe, I guess, as you were sort of grappling at the point of that inflection, the way you looked at suicide, you mentioned to me that, you didn't feel like you were living in your true reality. What then did you do to then say, you know what, I'm going to now ground my own existence in reality?
Yeah.
How did that process work for you?
I think pain, one of the reasons pain is such an important pivot point for most of us is it gets rid of the ego. You have an ego death. You have an ego death. So I left my job making 6 figures, and I started a company about a podcast, and I was embarrassed as heck. It was not cool to leave a 6-figure job and be a broke podcaster. It was not cool. I was broke. I was lonely. I had no idea if we were going to be successful. I lost all the allure of the external stuff. So that was one piece. And then I remember I actually felt fulfilled, and I felt proud of the man I was becoming. To me, those were suggestions that I was getting to the root of who I was, and I wasn't living this external existence anymore. So for me, it came through massive pain. Everything changed in that moment. And then I left my job and I went all in on this. I think as humans, we need to do hard things, because hard things create humility. They create perspective. And it's really hard to take your warm home for granted when you sleep out in a tent for a week.
Yeah.
It's just so easy to lose sight of how good so many of us do have it in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, for me, it was massive pain. I don't want everybody to have to get to that point, but something that's going to silence your ego, or at least put it to sleep for a little while, is always helpful.
And I guess that portion of the ego was just constantly come up, and I love that piece. So what I want to do is I want to go quick fire round.
Okay.
3 questions. I usually would like less explanation, but more like an answer. But I know myself, I'm going to ask you like, what? How? But okay. But so the first one is, what is the worst feedback that you've ever heard? Like, whether it's delivery or like whatever, what is the worst feedback?
There is a line out the door of people who want your job. Do it right or else.
Wow.
Not good.
And why would you say that's not good? Actually, see, I told you, but why would you say that's not good?
Because you're not checking in with why the job is not getting done correctly. Your feedback from a place of scarcity is really dangerous because it is not constructive by nature. So that was a low effort way to communicate how they were feeling, not an attempt to improve the culture. Nobody's going to work harder. Nobody is going to work harder sustainably and constructively from a place of fear. That was the day where I was like, I don't like you guys anymore. You guys changed. This is different. This isn't what it used to be. So that.
Beautiful. What's the one cultural blind spots that you feel leaders often miss when giving feedback? Yeah.
They try to give feedback in the way that they like to receive it, not understanding that not everybody is wired the same way they are.
I hate that you use that example. I really do, because it's just that is so much easier, because you
Yeah.
If I can take it, why can't you? You know, if I can toughen up or whatever, it's because in the end that's what makes sense to you.
There's a downside on my end too, because I'm really supportive and really warm, and that's the way I like getting it, but that's not always the best way to give it to certain people.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right?
Fair
So
enough.
there's a downside on both ends.
Okay. And if you're to look into a crystal ball if you were to look into a crystal ball and you project to the future, what would you say, or what would you hope that future leaders do more of in the way that they give feedback? And by that, I mean, are there things that we're seeing currently that you wish we could look to address in a more conscious way? And even worse off is the fact that things are changing. How might that change?
I would say understanding the way you make people feel affects the bottom line and dollars earned more than we give credit to.
Wow.
I know it's numbers, and I know we run businesses and we need to make margins and all that, but the way you treat someone affects their behavior way more than we probably give credit to. And I think that's an important leadership thing to understand.
I think for me, that is so important, because like I said to you, I work with a lot of people, and at the end of the day, you can instill fear. You can drive a certain level of performance through fear. And I was actually having a discussion with somebody earlier today, is like, you can use the fear of somebody else, or you go, oh, that person, the CEO, does not like it when this happens, you know? In the end, it's not, all you're doing is just driving a behavior through a stick. Whereas if you are able to find a way to make somebody want to be part of this, want to be in that space through the way that you communicate, through your feedback, I think that then is more lasting and impactful.
I would agree. I think if you can make people proud to be on the mission, they're going to be willing to do more for the mission. If they're afraid that the boat is going to sink, they're not going to help you grow. It's not going to be sustainable.
And so if you then had a task, an objective, if you had what is that next thing that you would like to do? Like yourself? I'm very curious, because I mean, obviously you are driving this podcast and you've hit really good numbers, but what is that thing that then you go, I'm here now and I want to do more? And I'm just curious, because you seem like very self-aware. You seem like you're driving towards something, or are you just in the ride, enjoying the ride and looking to live life to the fullest?
The ride is mayhem. So no, the ride is mayhem. I'm enjoying the ride, but there's a lot going on. Our ultimate goal is to have the most successful success podcast on the planet. So that, I mean, we didn't do 2,200 episodes for fun. We did that because we want to have the most successful podcast. So yeah, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and there's a lot of discipline and put your head down and grind it out. I love it because I'm fulfilled.
Yeah.
And this is, I said this to you behind the scenes. This is literally a dream come true for me. So I'm playing with house money, but yeah, it's pretty intense and pretty serious behind the scenes.
Now that's beautiful. What I'd like to do is I'd like to wrap the episode with a quote of the episode. The quote of the episode just sort of comes to me through the conversation. So today's quote is, quiet the ego, soften the heart, open the mind, and be kind. And the reason why I felt that this quote really talks to what we talked about is, I think it's all about that duality of life. And in order to be able to have that duality, you have to be very open-minded. You have to be self-aware and keen to grow. Without being keen to grow, you will struggle to appreciate other people's perspective, and therefore struggle to connect with people to then be able to give them effective feedback. Through the discussions that we had, what was clear to me is that at that juncture where you sat, and I think you said you were 27, and you were contemplating suicide, I think that was the moment through pain that opened your mind, softened your heart, and quieted the ego, that unlocked that ability for you to step forward to Alan and really seek some assistance. And though it might be a very scary place to have been in, I think your ability to stand forward to be, because in an essence, you're kind to yourself because you're like, you know what? I can't do this by myself. I need to have that humility to then go to Alan, somebody you trust, to then get some level of feedback, to then open your world towards, I guess, what you could do more of and be better as an individual. Not successful, but really better in terms of fulfilling. And those keywords in terms of that environmental change, despite you being fully aware, that environmental change was what he then gave you feedback to then unlock what lay deep within you. And so, though you might be 2,187 episodes deep in 180 countries, I think the journey that then propelled you into the space where you are now started with a simple but vulnerable space where you were able to give feedback. And for me, I take a lot of humility in you being able to share this conversation because I think the things that you have incredible sound bites. I mean, it's just, I'm like, this has just got quotes galore. I mean, Drive to Five, where you start with somebody who does not believe in themselves all the way to somebody who's complete egotistical and thinks that they can do everything without any effort. That was 0 to 10. We're trying to be that humble, but still confident and looking to grow. I think that is such a wonderful concept for people to keep in mind because that then allows for them to really be able to give feedback, but more so than anything, connect with somebody to be able to understand, make them feel seen, and then make sure that when they're providing feedback, they're looking to benefit other people through the process. And when you are able to connect with somebody, connect with their goals, reverberate what it is that they have mentioned to you, what they want, then it's more likely for you to be successful in the way that you communicate and give that feedback. And whether it is Bill Belichick, as good as he is as a coach and as a horrible human being, he's not horrible, but you're not going to take relationship advice from him. Is what we said, right? And everybody has that duality within the artist versus the art. And I guess it's like Kanye West, right? Like not everybody loves Kanye West, but you know, when you listen to his music, quite a lot of people are going to love how he does what he does because the person does not dictate what you can gain out of that individual. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned, even though the character might not be. And to do that, you have to be able to separate the two, and you have to be very self-conscious and self-aware. And whether that feedback is on layer 1, we're all needing to strive to get to that conscious state of giving feedback where we are giving a very constructive feedback that allows for development and growth. And without that, we deprive people from growing. And I love when you said you give feedback to the level where people think where you see they are. Because at the end of the day, if you give feedback all the way in, to somebody who is like me, who doesn't carry that level of confidence, then I mean, you stand to take away more than you're going to give. And I think at the end of the day, if we're able to honor that idea that when we give feedback, a lot of the time it is a very personal thing that we are communicating to somebody about something that might be personal. And it's not about how you do it. It's not about what you say, but it's also largely about how you do it. And when somebody has put their heart there and you just trample all over it, chances are that you're not leading by example, firstly, but secondly, you're not achieving a constructive outcome and output. And so for me, getting rid of the ego, quieting the ego, softening the heart, opening the mind, being kind has been a large portion of what we've talked about. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to have that impact. We're not going to have that impact if we are actually selfish with the way that we give feedback, selfish with the way that we look at life, selfish in the way that we give impact, I guess, and try to transfer a certain level of impact. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. You know, though feedback at times seems like a dirty word, what you've broken down for me is it's more like a growth language. It's a language that allows you to grow. And if we're able to do that effectively, not only do we grow, but the people who we interact with too. So, I mean, Kevin, you've flipped the script on this one for me. I really appreciate you taking the time and you sharing the insights. I don't know if you've got maybe a parting word or a couple of things that you might want to say.
Man, I would say feedback is it's not recommended, it's necessary. Yeah, at the end of the day, you either get the feedback a little bit each day, little by little by little by little, or you get it all at once at the end. And a real quick example, the quickest example ever. I went to the fire academy when I was younger. I felt too dumb to ask questions. I felt too dumb to raise my hand. Eventually, the first fire I went to after I graduated, I didn't know what the heck to do. I didn't get feedback along the way. I got the feedback all at once at the end, and that wrecked my fire career.
That's so, I love that. I love your story. I love how you package it. And quite frankly, this episode for me has had a combination of, really threading a lot of your personal life into what we're talking about, which is always so much more fulfilling. And the way that you, like I said, sound bites, like literal, like reels on reel. I really look forward to getting this episode out there. And so for anybody who's also really enjoyed this over and beyond the podcast, I think if you're looking to unpack some of these elements, there's a T4L program or course about cultural intelligence. And I think for me, having that awareness, being able to give that feedback and having a sort of a cultural awareness as well, or cultural intelligence, allows for you to be able to connect with people and then get more out of an individual. What is better than having that ability to the tools to be able to have that impact and the skills through podcasts like this and through courses like the cultural intelligence course. I think a lot of people will gain so much from this. And for me, I'd like to encourage anybody to hit that like button, hit that subscribe, and even more so, if you know anybody, any single person who either struggles to give feedback, struggles to listen to feedback, I think maybe you might want to just send them this link. Just send them the link. Don't even say anything. Just be like, this is for you. And I really hope they then get to the end of this and they'll be like, so this is the message that is within the comments. But Kevin, like I said, absolute pleasure having you on today. And I've had so much fun. And I really know that our listeners will have had probably more fun than me. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to pour into the lives of your audience. I appreciate it very much.
This podcast is brought to you by Transformation Leader. You can follow us at www.t4leader.com.